So today's topic of discussion will be backyard orchard culture and all the controversies and differences between what we do under backyard conditions and what are done under agricultural conditions. So there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences. I will do about the first half of my presentation just verbally, and then if you want to take a break, and then we do the second half with a PowerPoint presentation. So I guess my first question to you guys would be, how many people are growing, say, within 15 or 20 miles of this location? So most of you. How many people are more inland than that? A few of you. That makes a big difference in what you can grow, you know, the varieties that are adapted to the area. So I always like to know who I'm dealing with. I've done this presentation all over the place and end up with all sorts of different microclimates and things that people are growing in, and everybody has a different soil type, and everybody has a different weather condition, and everybody has different seasonal variations and things like that. So it's all really based on that. Backyard orchard culture in itself is not anything that is unchangeable. Backyard orchard culture is something that you're going to make for yourself. You're going to make it work for your particular conditions. So it's not based on geography or based on weather types or anything like that. It's based on what you can do successfully in your area and what you want to do, what you want to grow, and what you like to eat. So a lot of differences between what commercial growers do and what backyard growers do. I think probably the first and maybe most important would be the fact that a commercial grower, somebody that grows fruit for a living, they want to come in and harvest all of their crop at one time. They want to come into the 20 acres of late Legrand nectarines and pick all that fruit and get it washed and get it sized and get it graded and get it cold stored and get it shipped out to their retail location so that they get their check. That's what they do for a living. So what we do, what you guys do, what I do, we don't grow fruit for a living. We grow fruit because we like to eat fresh fruit, and we're basically dissatisfied with what's available in the markets nowadays. So I don't know when the last time any of you have gone to the market and bought a peach or a tomato or you know, an apricot or something like that, but in general, we don't really get what we've experienced from tree-ripened fruit or what we can get at the local farmers markets or, you know, from local roadside stands and things like that. So the nice thing about backyard orchard culture is what you can't grow, you can probably buy from some of those sources. You're not going to find a good peach in the grocery store. In fact, has anybody in the last year, 2 years, 3 years, has anybody bought a good peach in the grocery store? Nobody. Not one person. Well, that's discouraging for the commercial peach growers, but not really discouraging for me because it really kind of hits my point, you know, close to home. That there are a lot of things that you're not going to be able to buy in good quality, and those you should concentrate on growing yourself. That's where you're going to make the best use of your backyard space. So a commercial grower wants to grow it all at one time, wants to go and do all their harvest at one time. They want a lot of fruit in a short period of time. You, as backyard growers, want exactly the opposite. You want a little bit of fruit all the time instead of a lot of fruit at any one given time. Even a full-sized tree, let's consider a full-sized Red Baron peach tree. The estimated yield on a full-sized Red Baron peach, which would be about 15 feet wide and about 10 feet high, would be 250 to 350 pounds of fruit. Now that all ripens up in about a 2.5 to 3 week period of time. So my first question is, does anybody have use for even 200 pounds of peaches in a 2 week period of time? No, not really. So we don't really need to consider full-size trees. We don't need to consider what a commercial grower is going to do on their property in order to get what they would expect a commercial crop to be. So I don't want a commercial crop of peaches or plums or apricots. I don't need that. I actually learned my lesson many years ago when my wife and I first got married in 1978. And we bought our first house, and it was right after the 4th of July weekend when we were moving in. And I had some furniture and things that were stored at my grandfather's house, so I took a truck and took some guys and went over there and picked up the furniture. And like I said, it was right after 4th of July weekend. My grandfather had a big, beautiful Santa Rosa plum tree. You guys know Santa Rosa plum? Great variety, old Luther Burbank hybrid. The variety's over 120 years old. It's been grown all throughout the western United States for many, many, many years, all over the world. It's one of the most popular plum varieties in the world. So my grandfather has this beautiful tree, 20 feet high, 10 feet wide, loaded with plums. Perfect season, right after 4th of July. So we load up some furniture, we take some bags, we go out and we pick plums. I mean, bags and bags and bags of plums. And go back to my new house and move the furniture in, and everybody's enjoying the Santa Rosa plums. And my wife asked me this question. She goes, there's this kind of a leaded glass octagon window here on the west side, and she goes, it's letting all this hot summer sun into the living room. She goes, why don't we plant a deciduous tree out off of that window, and that way we can block the sun in the summertime and allow the sun in the wintertime when we want it. I thought, hey, you know what, that's a great idea. And I thought to myself, you know, my grandfather's not going to have this Santa Rosa plum tree forever, and that would be a great thing to put out there. I can grow my own Santa Rosa plums from here on out. So first fruit tree I ever planted, 1978. I worked for Armstrong Nurseries at the time. I went to work the next day. I buy my 5-gallon Santa Rosa plum. I think I bought it. Anyway, I planted it in the ground about 10 feet out off that window, and it does beautiful. Doubles in size through the summer, so goes dormant the next winter, blooms out in the spring, sets about a half a dozen fruit. First year I was kind of greedy. I didn't even tell my wife they were ripe. I ate them all myself, and they were delicious, you know. So tree doubles in size again and starting to put a little shade on the window now. Next year rolls around, 30, 35 fruit on the tree. Just wonderful. Share some with the neighbors, share some with my wife. Let's fast forward about 10 years down the road. The tree's now 15, 16 feet tall. It's 10 or 12 feet wide. I dread the first 2 weeks in July because I'm getting 500, 600, 700 Santa Rosa plums that all ripen up in a 2 or 3 week period of time. So I'm trying to do everything I can do to make use of that fruit. I'm giving it to the kids to take to school, and I'm taking it to work and giving it to customers. And pretty soon the neighbors don't answer the door anymore. What are you going to do with 500 plums in a 2 week period of time? It doesn't make sense. It's not what a backyard grower wants or needs. Unless you're a roadside stand, or unless you make you know, gallons of plum jam, you don't have any use for 500 Santa Rosa plums. And I don't think I need to go into detail and tell you what happens when you eat too many plums in too short a period. No, that's an experience you'll only go through once. And after that, it's what do we do? How do we make use of this fruit? But honestly, it's a commercial expectation. It's something that the average homeowner doesn't think that they are ever going to have to deal with until their Santa Rosa plum becomes full-size mature. So let's consider this. What if we were to take that same amount of space, say 100, 150 square foot footprint, and instead of putting in one variety, let's put in 4. So let's put in a beauty plum that ripens up in late May and early June. Let's put in our Santa Rosa that is late June and early July. Let's put in a burgundy plum that is late July and into August, and let's put in a flavor grenade pluot that is August into September. So now, same footprint, that same amount of space, 100, 150 square feet, but we've got 4 trees in there. So each one of those trees is given 25% of that growth space. And anything that grows over that, if one grows more vigorously, it's kept in check. If one is a little bit weaker, we give it a little more attention, maybe a little more fertilizer. And we try and keep a good balance, 25% each on those 4 varieties. So now we've got May, June, June, July, July, August, August, September. So instead of getting 2 or 3 weeks worth of fruit, we've now got almost 3 months worth of fruit out of the same amount of space. Doesn't that make sense? Yeah. That's backyard orchard culture. That's what you would do under a backyard condition to keep away from getting that big commercial crop. Because now you've got trees that are size managed and trees that are in a small area, so they're only going to give you a considerably smaller crop than what that standard tree would have given you. So now, maybe 50 to 100 plums in May, June, 50 to 100 in June, July, 50 to 100 July, August, 50 to 100 August, September. So you're getting a staggered crop over a longer period of time so that you can use the fruit. You don't have an intimidating amount of fruit at any one given time, and you can make use of all of them. So we can stretch that out. I mean, you can do that with almost anything. I could put in Dorset Golden Apple and a Fuji Apple and a Gala Apple and a Pink Lady Apple, and I've got 6 months worth of successive ripening apples. I can put in a Hass avocado and a Reed avocado and a Bacon avocado and a Pinkerton avocado. And I have like 12 months worth of successive ripening avocado varieties. In fact, at almost any given time, I can pick 2 varieties. So by making use of our space through backyard orchard culture, we can now grow multiple varieties in the same amount of space where a commercial grower would only consider growing 1. This is not a commercial procedure. A commercial grower would never ever do anything like that. They want big solid blocks of single varieties so that they can get their equipment and their people in there and make use of those varieties and pick that large amount of fruit. This is something you're going to do in your backyard where you don't need to worry about commercial expectations or harvests. So there are 3 main concepts to backyard orchard culture. We've already talked about this one, successive harvest. Being able to harvest multiple varieties out of the same amount of space over a longer period of time. That way we have a little bit of fruit all the time instead of a lot of fruit at any one given time. The next and probably most important concept is control tree size so it's manageable for you. And in the past, I've been accused of telling people how big they should keep their trees. And in all actuality, I'm not doing that at all. What I'm doing is I'm throwing it back at you. I'm telling you to keep your trees managed to a size that's manageable for you. I'm not going to tell you how big that size should be because that's entirely up to you. You know how much fruit you want. You know how much space you have. You know the horticultural style that you've chosen to grow those trees under, whether it's multiple planted or multiple grafted or a hedgerow or single trees spaced out or you know, any form that you choose, espalier trees, anything like that can be incorporated into fruit tree growing. So however you've chosen horticulturally is going to determine the size and shape of your tree and also partly determine the amount of fruit that you're going to get off that tree. So that's your choice. And for me, it's really simple. I stand next to my tree and I put my hand up, and that's how high I want my tree to be. Now that doesn't go for everything. There's exceptions to every rule, and one of those exceptions would certainly be avocados. If I only grew my avocado trees to 7.5 feet high, then I wouldn't have near enough avocados that I need for myself or to share with my neighbors, or every time my daughter comes over with the Trader Joe's bag. It's all about, you know, that's the trees everybody goes to. It's, you know, peaches, yeah, okay, peaches are great, you know, mandarins are great, but what do you got in avocados, you know? Everybody goes to the store and at a buck a piece, it's the most appealing fruit in my orchard. So an avocado tree growing to 7 feet isn't going to give me enough fruit, but avocados don't ripen like a plum or a peach or an apricot. They don't ripen in a 2-week or 3-week period of time. They ripen up over 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, or even more. So to grow successive ripening avocado trees together, I can easily allow those to grow up to 15 feet high, and I can manage that fruit with a 10-foot pole and a basket picker. So anytime I want to go out and pick avocados, I can go out and grab 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever I'm going to need for the next week or 10 days, and then go back and do the same thing again when I'm starting to run low. They take a few days to soften up, as you guys know, so I can always continually replenish that. And a 7-foot tree didn't do it, so I had to give those avocado trees more space. I've got some citrus, some oranges, and some lemons and grapefruit and things like that that are larger than 7 feet, because again, they hold on the tree for a long period of time and are easily managed. But if it's a fruit variety that ripens up over a 2 or 3 week period of time, I want to be able to go out and do all my work from the ground. So no ladders, no pole pickers, no climbing the tree, no standing on some rickety old fruit box, but I want to be able to do it from the ground. So I can do my pruning, my thinning, my harvesting, anything I need to do from standing on the ground. Makes it simple, makes it easy. And it gives me a lot of diversity growing those small trees in a contained amount of space, so I can put a lot more trees in a small amount of space and have a lot more different fruit types that are coming out of that same amount of small space. So, number one, successive ripening, a little bit of fruit all the time instead of a lot of fruit at any one given time. Number two, control tree size, form, and function so that it's manageable for you. Whatever size you choose, whatever form you choose, whatever style you choose to grow those trees in is perfectly acceptable. So all you have to do is decide where you want them to be, and you take that into consideration and control the trees that way. Any questions so far? Yes?
So I see what's becoming a little more popular for the backyard orchid is the trees that have several different types grafted on them. Like you might,
Fruit salad.
A fruit salad.
Absolutely, yeah. Multi-grafted
So
trees
what's
are
your
more
opinion
popular.
on those? Are they easier to grow? Are they really as effective if you're planting, say, in a postage stamp in normal heights?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there are some keys to success with multiple budded trees. The first one is very, very simple. Just like I explained with this multiple planted combination, I'm going to dedicate, if it's a 4-in-1, each variety gets 25% of that space. If it's a 3-in-1, each variety gets 1/3 of that space, and no more. I'm never going to allow any one of those varieties to dominate that combination. So as soon as a variety becomes more vigorous and grows out of balance, I can't make a weak variety grow faster, but I can easily make a fast variety grow slower by checking that growth. So anything that I have that's dominant is going to be reduced more regularly than a variety that's not, allowing the weaker varieties to catch up. So no variety is ever given any more of that space than was originally dedicated to. So that's the key to success with anything multiple planted or multiple budded. Balance between all the varieties together. Yes?
Are you recommending full-size trees and you prune it to manage it, or do you recommend semi-dwarf or dwarf plants?
I recommend, and we'll talk about this a little more, I don't recommend that anybody consider a rootstock to be size control. So semi-dwarfing rootstock compared to a standard rootstock. Let's talk about probably the most popular semi-dwarfing fruit rootstock in the world. It's Molling's 111. It's an apple rootstock that was hybridized by Merton Malling Research Station in England. It's been on the market now for over 60 years, and it's considered the best semi-dwarfing rootstock for apples. So if I grew a standard Fuji apple on a seedling rootstock, I could expect that tree to grow 30 to 40 feet in height. How big do you think that the most popular semi-dwarfing rootstock for apples in the world, how big do you think that tree is going to grow?
10 feet.
10 feet. How about 35? Oh, excuse me, 25. 30 to 40 would be the full-size standard. The M111 would be 25. So when you think semi-dwarf, do you think 25 feet? No. So the control of size is back to you. That's only going to be done by you keeping the tree maintained at a size that's manageable for you. But what I encourage you to do is pay close attention to the rootstocks that the trees are grafted onto, because those are the lifeblood of the tree. Those are what's going to maintain the tree in your climate and in your soil. And we grow Fuji apple on 7 different rootstocks. We grow Santa Rosa plum on 6 different rootstocks. And the reason that we do that is because different rootstocks are adaptable to different climates and adaptable to different soil types. So for San Diego County, if you wanted to buy a Fuji apple, I'm going to tell you, you want a Fuji apple on Molling's 111. It's the best rootstock by far for San Diego County. But it's not going to give you the dwarfing size that you expect out of it. So that's still up to you to keep that tree dwarfed. So never consider a rootstock because it's semi-dwarf or because it's standard. Only consider the other 2 attributes: adaptability to your geography and adaptability to your soil type. Yes?
Are you going to talk a little bit today about growing some of these in pots for people who live in town?
We will discuss, when we discuss blueberries a little further on, we'll talk about growing other material in containers. Yes?
If you had a different shape than the square, you could do this like in a side yard with a long skinny space.
You're going to use this methodology to make trees fit the designated space that you have, whether it's a triangle, a circle, a square, an L shape, an oblong, whatever, a kidney-shaped mound, I don't care. Whatever size you have to work with, that's what you're going to, the space that you're going to dedicate to those trees, and you're going to balance out those trees through that designated area. So you can make it work in any form you want. You don't have to consider that you're growing like a farmer. Again, you don't need to consider what a farmer's going to do. A farmer's going to plant everything in true north-south rows, and you don't need to do that. You're not planting thousands of trees or hundreds of trees, so all you're going to do is plant trees that are going to fill the designated space that you have in your landscape. Okay, go ahead.
Just real quick back to rootstock. So when you see the label on a tree, minor lemon, dwarf, are they stating it's dwarf because of the rootstock that it's on, or is it some type of that tree that is dwarf in size?
That's a good question, and actually it can go either way depending on what the rootstock is or what the cultivar is. We have, for example, peach and nectarine varieties a couple cherry varieties, a couple apple varieties, a couple apricot varieties that we call miniatures. And those are varieties that are dwarf within themselves. So I can graft those onto a standard peach rootstock, and I'm still going to grow a miniature tree. And then we have varieties that we call semi-dwarf that are dwarfed supposedly by the rootstock that they're grafted onto, and then standard, which would be the full-sized seedling rootstock. So it depends on whether you're looking at any one of those different categories. With citrus, they have the same three measurements. Basically, they have standard, full-size seedling rootstocks. They have semi-dwarf, like rubidoo or Pomeroy trifoliate. And then they have what they would call a true dwarf, which would be grafted onto a flying dragon rootstock, which is the most compact growing and the least compatible of the citrus rootstock. So it's going to be a short-lived tree, but it's going to be small.
So do you assume, you know what they say, that if you go into a nursery and you see the label from the grower and it says semi-dwarf or dwarf, that will be that? That they use that cultivar?
Boy, we'd like to think so, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
We'd like to think that when we buy something, it is what the tag says. Now, and oftentimes with things like citrus and avocados, that isn't really fully disclosed on the label because there aren't that many diversifications of rootstocks, like when you get into deciduous fruits, you know, prunus and malus and things like that. We've got hundreds of rootstocks where in citrus they only have a handful, or avocados they only have a handful. So for the most part, if you're buying citrus or avocados, you know they're going to be on rootstocks that will be adaptable to our, you know, subtropical Southern California type climate. But if you're buying a stone fruit, it's a different story because, you know, we use different rootstocks for different climate adaptability. So I may have Santa Rosa plum on citation, semi-dwarf. I may have it on standard, my Roebelin or Nemagard. I may have it on another semi-dwarf called St. Julian. Well, the only attribute that St. Julian would have really is that it can go to 40 below zero. So there's no benefit for growing a Santa Rosa plum on St. Julian in Southern California. It's a terrible rootstock for Southern California. So the other options, you know, the Myrobolin or the Nemagard or the Citation would all be better options for your area. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're not only researching the cultivar, you want to know what the variety is. This is Santa Rosa plum, or this is Fuji apple, or this is Meyer lemon, but what rootstock is it on? Because if it's not on a rootstock that's going to do well in our climate and our soil type, then I'm wasting my time by planting a tree. So, you know, look at both of those components. Each tree, or let's say most fruit trees are made up of two different parts, a root and a top. And there are a few exceptions, pomegranates and figs and things like that are just propagated from hardwood cuttings, so those, you know, there is no rootstock. But when it comes to just about any other type of fruit tree, you're going to have both a rootstock and a cultivar. Yes?
Where do the rootstocks come from? Are you growing a tree and then taking that root and then grafting?
Yeah, exactly. Our program, our field-grown program, is to plant either a rootstock seed or a rootstock cutting in the ground in the fall and grow that out for one season, and then the following fall or late summer, that would be grafted or budded to the particular variety that you want to produce, and then one more year is put into that bud, and then the tree, and it's after the end of its second year, is dug and marketed. So yeah, that's the way that all grafted material is propagated. First you got to start out with a root, and then you put your bud in, and then you grow your cultivar.
Are you taking a cutting from one single tree and grafting it onto multiple rootstocks?
Yeah, sure. If I want to grow Santa Rosa plum on different rootstocks, my mother tree, my Santa Rosa tree, is still the same tree. And then my rootstocks are going to come from alternate, you know, sources, whatever that cultivar rootstock is that I want to use for that particular geographic adaptability or soil adaptability. Yes?
You use it to graft your own. You already have a tree.
If you go to our website and look at our fruit tube videos, there's some videos on there that demonstrate grafting. You know, or if you participate in the local rare fruit growers chapter, things like that, they have all kinds of information on grafting. So I'm not going to explain it in detail today because it doesn't go along with my program. It would take way too much time to do that, but there's all kinds of information out there that you can get on grafting.
There's an organization in San Francisco supposedly that goes around grafts on like the ornamental cherry trees, and they've been saying they're grafting on like edible cherry grafts onto the stalks. Is that something that's even possible?
No, it's not impossible at all. It's, I would say it's probably not ethical, but
Yeah.
it's not impossible. I wouldn't want somebody coming into my yard and grafting my, Sobertilla weeping cherry over to a plant, that kind of defeats the purpose of what I had there in the first place, so. If it's something that somebody's approving of and that's what they want to do, that's fine. The rootstocks are interchangeable, so that's not an issue. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the third most important concept of backyard horticulture. We talked about successive ripening. We talked about tree size control, so it's manageable for you. I think the third concept is really easy. Grow what you like and what you'll use. You don't want to waste a whole lot of time growing something because somebody else said it was good, or because somebody, all of a sudden you see this tree and it's got a great picture label and it's Chilean wine guava or something like that. Wow, that sounds really good. I wonder if it tastes like wine. I'm going to plant one of those and grow it out for 5 years and then say, well, this isn't really what I want. In fact, I have a great story that relates to that. About 10 years ago, I get this phone call from this guy in the fall. It's around October, and the guy says to me, what do you do with quince? I said, well, when I was a kid, I used to throw them at cats on my grandmother's back. Yeah, my wife's a cat lover. I don't think I can do that. Here's my deal. About 5 years ago, I went down to the Kmart, and it was the end of the bare root season, and all their trees were on sale for $5. Hey, that's a great price. You can't grow a tree for $5. He said, yeah, all they had left were quince, so I bought 5 of them. So, minimal financial investment of $25, but now 5 years worth of your pruning, fertilizing, irrigating, your garden space, all of that time and effort devoted to growing a beautiful crop of quince and having no idea what to do. So do a little homework, research your varieties before you plant them. Make sure they're varieties that are adapted to your area. Make sure they're things that you're going to like to use. This guy thought he's going to go out and pick a quince off the tree and take a bite out of it and eat it like an apple. He didn't have any idea what it was. Well, quince isn't that kind of fruit. It's a processing fruit. It makes jams and jellies and I'd pay $1,000 for one of my grandmother's quince tarts, but I'll never get that opportunity again, but I have the memory, and it's a great memory. So there's all kinds of uses for quince, but it's not for me. I don't have a quince in my yard. I'm not going to make quince tarts or jams or jellies. I want to go out and eat fresh fruit, so I'm not going to plant one. But this guy's idea was, boy, I'm going to have all these wonderful quince, and isn't that going to be great? Even though he didn't really know what it was. So do your homework. Make sure you understand what you're putting in. Make sure you know that the variety is adaptable to your area. Make sure it's a type of fruit that you're going to like and your family's going to like, and you're going to be able to make use of. So a little bit of strategic planning up front will save you a lot of time and agony later on. And believe me, I hear it all the time. Yeah, I just wasted 10 years worth of time on this variety that I really don't like, or it really doesn't do well in the area. I keep hoping that it's going to produce fruit, and it gave me 6 fruit 2 years ago, and that's it. So make sure you're planting varieties that you know are going to be adaptable to the area, and varieties that you know you're going to like. So those are the 3 concepts. If you go home with just those 3 concepts today, you'll be a much, much better, much more effective and efficient backyard grower. Successive ripening, control tree size so it's manageable for you, grow what you like and you'll use, and what's adaptable to your area. It's pretty easy, really, if you just consider those 3 things. Any questions?
Where do papayas fit? Are they considered a fruit?
Yes, papayas are in a classification called herbaceous biennial, which means they're going to live for more than 1 year, but probably not more than 3 or 4 or 5. So what commercial papaya growers do is they plant their trees about 5 feet apart, and then in the second year, the end of the second year, into the third year, they interplant a new plant in the middle. And as the larger plant finishes up its 3rd year or 4th year, the large plant's removed and the young plant's allowed to come up and take over. So you want to put papayas somewhere where you're going to be able to change them out after a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year period.
What did you call them? What kind of?
Herbaceous biennial. Yes.
My question is about stone fruit that require cross-pollination. So if we've got a small backyard, not a huge backyard, and we want to plant an apricot, but we would also like to plant a plum, some of these are requiring another cultivar to be close enough that they can cross-pollinate, right?
Yes,
So you actually can't have 4 different fruits. You have to have 2 different cultivars of the same.
Well, Yes and no. You know, I mean, even varieties that are considered self-fruitful, and there are hundreds. You know, you've got in plums, you've got, you know, Shiro and Burgundy and Santa Rosa, and you know, all kinds of varieties that are self-fruitful, as well as the varieties that aren't. The same with apricots. You've got Goldkist and Katy and Blenheim and all the apriums and things like that that are self-fertile, and then some that aren't. So I would recommend that you look for self-fertile cultivars if you're going to just plant one, but always consider this. Even when it's something that's self-fertile, if you plant a pollinator variety with it, your fruit crop is going to be 10 times what it would be on that other variety. So even the self-fertile varieties are going to produce a lot more with a good pollinator. So you may want to make sure you dedicate space, and you know that's easy. If you have space to plant one tree, you can easily I could easily plant, you know, 2 apricot varieties, just kind of V them out from each other and grow it as one single trunk tree or double trunk tree if that's what I want to do. I don't need to
Were there
consider
root doing this?
Yeah, absolutely they will. But you know, they're both grafted onto the same rootstock, so they're both on Nemagard or they're both on Myrobalan, so the rootstocks can grow compatibly together. Now, you don't want to mix things that aren't that are out of family. You know, like the nice thing about peach, plum, nectarine, apricot is they're all prunus. They're all in the same family, and they can all be grown on the same rootstock, and they can all be grown together. That's why we can graft them all into one tree. We do multiple budded fruit salad trees with peach, plum, nectarine, apricot, all grafted onto one tree. So you can do that.
Cross-pollinating, and they're helping each other out?
Not necessarily, because they're different, you know, flower types and they're different species. They're the same genus, but they're different species. So they're not necessarily going to help each other when it comes to cross-pollination. But if somebody wants a peach, a plum, and a nectarine and an apricot, and they only have 10 feet by 10 feet of space to dedicate to it, then there's your answer. You know, I want to be able to supply a fruit tree to everybody. And you know, we grow a lot of multiple budded fruit trees. We, you know, do 4 plums on one tree, 4 apples on one tree, 4 cherries on one tree. You know, 4 of prune selections, or all kinds of different varieties that are multiple budded together. And I love multiple budded trees for many reasons. Number one, they're expensive, and my income is commission based. So I love to sell multiple budded trees because they're they're pricey, and I make a good commission on them. Multiple budded trees sold. So thank you, for planting. But, in general, it's kind of a novelty item.
Yeah.
But I'm on board. I mean, I have many in my landscape, and I've planted many over the years. As long as you take that into consideration, management of varieties for balance, then you're going to be fine. If you let one variety dominate the combination, then it's going to take over and you'll lose the weaker grafts after the second or third or fourth.
I keep hearing reports of that. That's why I asked.
That's because people don't manage.
Oh, well, one of them didn't work
Yeah, of
out.
course. But in general, that's that simple concept that people don't understand when they go into it, and they're really happy that the plum is 10 feet tall, but they're wondering why the apricot's only down here and the peach is just a little branch over here, because they never managed the plum. They never kept the plum in check. So you got to manage the dominant varieties so that you keep them in check with the weaker varieties. In fact, the statement is really never let any variety be any more aggressive or dominant than the weakest variety on the tree.
When you say manage the variety, it just means pruning it, right?
Manage means pruning, yes. Yes.
And nothing
absolutely.
more.
Pardon?
It's nothing more than just pruning. Spank it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, basically nothing more than pruning, keeping that variety in check and in balance, yes.
Have you seen pears in this area? Do they locate in this area?
In general, no. Pears require more chill than what we're going to get in this area, but there are some low chill varieties that are adaptable. But the big problem with pears really is they're very susceptible to fire blight. And there's a lot of fire blight in San Diego County. So if you planted fruiting pears and you don't control fire blight on a regular basis, which takes quite a bit of effort, you'll probably lose the tree in 3 to 5 years. So if you look at my recommendations, all my top recommendations, I don't recommend any pear varieties because fire blight is just too much of an issue that, to me, takes too much time and effort to keep under control. So I planted pear varieties, dozens of pear varieties, and I've really gotten to the point with all of them where I decided, hey, you know what, it's too much work for me. So if you're diligent and want to do that, yes, but if not, I'd say plant something that's not as susceptible to fire blight.
So if somebody wanted to plant multiple trees, they have very specific things they want, they could come to you and say, hey, can you graft this tree for me? And
No, don't do that. I'm not gonna do that, no.
What was the question?
She said if somebody had specific needs for a multiple grafted tree, could they come to me and have me custom grow that tree for them? No, we don't do that. We're a big farming operation, and we grow about 10.5 million trees a year, and things like that would get absolutely lost in the shuffle. And if I was to commit to do that to somebody, then it would be my responsibility, and I'm not willing to accept that responsibility, so, no. But if you get in touch with the local California Rare Fruit Growers group, they meet in this building right over on the other side. I don't know what their schedule is, but I've spoken to that group many times. There are many members of that organization that do grafting work on site. So somebody may be able to create that tree for you, but it won't be me.
I guess that's what I was trying to get at, was just that that's something that people do.
Yes, it can be done. Absolutely, it can be done. Okay. Any other questions before we move on?
There's a question of planting 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
You take one big hole and put them all in, or you have the...
It depends on your spacing. You know, if you're going to plant the trees 12 or 18 inches apart, sure, you can dig one hole. If you're going to plant them 4 feet apart, then no, I would dig 4 individual holes or 3 individual holes. So it's all about the amount of the size of the trees that you're putting in and the amount of spacing in between the trees when you put them in. So if they're close, yes, it can be one big hole. If they're further apart, it should be individual holes for each tree.
What's the difference? Is there any difference in the outcome?
I don't know. Digging one big hole as opposed to 3 or 4 small
The
holes?
closeness of the competing trees.
It's just a matter of what's manageable for you. Again, you're not planting like a farmer, so you don't need to lay it out in a long roadway or anything like that. So maybe you have a space where you want to plant a hedgerow, so you're going to put in 10 trees 4 feet apart in a hedgerow. So I dig 10 individual holes. Maybe you're going to do a 3-in-1 where the trees are only 18 inches apart. So then I would do one big hole for that. But they're really, again, it's all about management, what you're willing to manage. I like to think that about 3 to 4 feet in between trees in a 3-in-1 or a 4-in-1 combination makes more sense, because you can actually get in the middle of the combination and work from the inside and then work from the outside. So I like to have mine a little further apart than what some people have done. But we've tested them. I've braided trees together. We planted them right on top of each other. I planted 3 plums together where the rootstocks are all intermingled with each other and grown out like that. And it can be easily done.
Wow.
It's just a matter of whatever you want to manage.
Wow.
Yes.
I had an experience where I put 3-in-1. I had an early grande peach, a Santa Rosa plum, and a nectarine. And little did I know, I went to a Dave Wilson out at Niffien's garden thing, and the early grande is a very aggressive tree. It grows very fast, where the plum and the nectarine didn't, and I lost the plum and nectarine. The early grande was great.
Well, see, the early grande breaks dormancy a month before the other 2. So the early grande, you would definitely want that on the far northeast side of that combination. That way it can break dormancy and it's not shading the later varieties up front. So the earlier it leaves out, the more north or northeast it should be in the combination.
So what should you look for if you're planting 3-in-1? That they all come into fruition at the same time? Or?
No, not necessarily. In fact, you don't want them to all come into fruiting at the same time. You want to have staggered fruit. So when you space them, you just make sure that the varieties that break dormancy early are on the north side and northeast side of the combination. Yeah.
The chill hours are very important also to consider, as well as area and all that.
If you look at the list of varieties that I recommend, they're all varieties that are around 300 or 400 chill hours, and you want to make sure that you take chill hours with a grain of salt. I've done a lot of research over the years with varieties, and if it says 500 chill hours, I guarantee you it's going to produce with 200 or 250.
Really? Most of us are more close, coastal,
Yes, all of the varieties on that list are all coastally adaptable. Yes, that's the way that list is supposed to go. Okay, let's move on again. So we talked about all the concepts. Let's talk about one more thing that I think is really important, that I've never been asked this question when I've gone into a retail nursery And I've never had anybody even question me on this, but I think it's probably one of the most important concepts when it comes to gardening in general, not only fruit trees, but anything you're going to grow. Understand your microclimate. And that's something that a lot of people don't really take into consideration. In fact, 9 out of 10 times when you lose a plant or a tree, it's not because the quality of that plant or tree was marginal, it's because you put that tree or that plant into an area where it wasn't its optimal growing condition. So understand everything about your microclimate. Where are your hot spots and where are your cold spots? Where do you get sun? Where do you get shade? Where are your wind-prone areas? Where are your frost-sensitive areas? What's your soil type? How does it drain? How does your irrigation system work? There's all kinds of variables when it comes to your microclimate. And everybody says, oh, well, I'm in zone 9. I don't care what zone you're in. Zone doesn't mean anything. There's so many variances within zones, it's not even funny. What makes the difference is what happens on your individual piece of property. You know, how is your wind shelter? When the Santa Anas blow, you know, does it shred your banana plant?
Yeah.
When it freezes in the wintertime, you're going to have cold areas and warm areas. So if you're going to grow a deciduous tree, you want it in a cold area. If you're going to grow a subtropical, you want it in a warm area. So understanding where it gets cold and where it doesn't get cold is important. Understanding your soil type. You know, if you don't understand your soil type, there's only one way to find out. Go out and dig some test holes. And I don't mean 2 or 3 or 5, I mean 25. On every nook and cranny in your property, you dig a test hole. And you make them all the same. You make them all 8 inches wide and 12 inches deep. And then you go back and you fill them all with water. And then you come back and figure out how long did it take to drain. It's pretty simple. Okay, well, all these over here, they drained in about 5 minutes. So the water was gone. These over here took about 2 hours. These over here still had water in them the next day. Fast draining, medium draining, poor drainage. So now you understand your drainage. So how does your irrigation system work? Everybody thinks, well, you turn the valve on and the water comes out. So, but how much water do you really get in an irrigation cycle? Has anybody measured that? Take some cups where they're all the same size, you know, with this cup or coffee, you know, Starbucks cup or a Solo cup or whatever. Put them all out through your landscape. Run your irrigation system for a full set. Go back and measure how much water is in each one of those cups. Well, over here there was 1/4 of an inch, and over here there was 3/8 of an inch, and over here there was 1/2 inch. So, you know, obviously either these heads don't put out as much water as these, or you have a wind element where the wind pushes the water from this direction to this direction. So work with it, figure it out. You know that I'm going to get more water over here than I'm going to get over here. That's important. If I'm going to put in a variety like a pomegranate, I'm going to look for the conditions that a pomegranate likes best. A pomegranate is a plant from the desert, so it's going to like hot and dry. So I'm not going to put a pomegranate in the shade where it stays wet. I'm going to put a pomegranate in an area where I have control over the irrigation and where it gets full, absolute hot sun. If I want to put in a papaya, they're very susceptible to frost damage. So I'm going to put it in an area where the drainage is good and where there's no frost issues. If I want to put in a banana, I don't want it shredded by the Santa Anas. I'm going to put it in a wind sheltered area. If I want to plant blackberries, I'm going to put those somewhere where it stays moist, maybe where the lawn water runs down and settles somewhere into a low spot. Great area for berries. They like that wet soil. So now that you understand your microclimate, once you understand everything about your microclimate, what it provides you as far as growing conditions, now you can make all the right decisions when you put a plant in. And like I said, it's not only fruit trees. You know, you need to make sure that you're putting a tomato in the right area, or an azalea in the right area, or a gardenia, or anything you're going to plant is going to have a specific need, and you need to provide that type of space and that type of environment for that plant to thrive. Otherwise, the plant's doomed. And I know you guys just like everybody else, just drag it out of the ground, go back to the nursery, and throw the dead azalea up on the counter and say, you sold me a bad plant. Well, there's 600 more of them over here, and they're all still green, and yours was the only bad one, and you picked it out. So it doesn't have anything to do with the plant that you bought. It has to do with the environment that you planted it in, or the conditions that you planted it in. But most nurseries guarantee their plants, so I'm going to bring my dead azalea back to you. So don't feel bad about it. Yes?
Do you ever have to worry about the trees, like the roots getting into your pipes or plumbing or anything with citrus?
The roots getting into your plumbing.
Just any of the fruit trees in general. Do you
if I had a septic system,
right.
I would be worried about things like mulberries and figs.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know, I certainly wouldn't plant a mulberry, 10 feet away from my septic system.
Right.
But in general, other than that, there probably aren't a whole lot of big shade trees would be a consideration. But you've got to consider one thing when you're talking about small-sized, grown, managed fruit trees. The root system grows in response to the tree's needs. So if you have a nice, small-size controlled fruit tree, you're not going to have an aggressive root system. Even with a fig. If I'm going to grow a fig in an area where I'm going to keep that fig limited to 7 feet high and 6 feet wide, where under normal conditions, that fig could get 30 feet by 30 feet. So that a root system on a 30 by 30 fig is going to be a lot more aggressive than one that's 7 by 6.
If you're controlling it, then you're actually, on top, you're controlling the root growth.
You're controlling the root growth in response to the amount of top that you're allowing the tree to have, yes.
So you could put it over leach lines.
I probably still wouldn't recommend it.
I mean, just regular fruit trees, those small ones, that you control it.
I would, you know what?
What was the question?
The question was, if you're controlling tree size, you can still plant fruit trees over a septic leach line.
Well, or even, you get your sprinkler line for irrigation.
No, and it's not going to interrupt the solid line like that. It's only going to interrupt something where there's porosity, where there's maybe a break in the line or a crack somewhere where the root can get into the system. And a leach field would be wide open to that. You're just putting water back into the ground, and that's the tree's going to respond to that and grow right into it. But pipes under pressure, water pipes, or even gravity flow sewer pipes and things like that are a pretty tight system, so they're not going to allow interference by tree roots.
Okay.
So septic systems are really the only thing you have to be real cautious about, unless you have a break in your line somewhere, then it's always an issue too. And if it's a live water line, you'll know if you have a break in it. Yes.
So let's say you make a mistake before you put the tree, and you realize you need to move it. You put the pomegranate, and it's just too wet or too shady. What is the maximum age at which you can transplant the tree?
Well, Valley Crest will come in and transplant a 200-year-old oak for you. So I don't think the age of the tree is the question. The question really is how much effort do I want to put in to trying to save and relocate this tree, as opposed to just getting rid of this one and putting in a new one somewhere. So I would say if the tree's been in the ground for more than 3 years, it's probably going to be too big and too cumbersome to move, unless you have some equipment to do it with. If you've got a backhoe and a couple of strong bodies to do it, you can move it on a tree once. So if not, I would probably replace the tree. Of course, I'm a horticulturalist that grows trees for a living, so I don't necessarily want you to transplant a tree. I'd rather have you buy a new one. So it's entirely up to you how you deal with that, how much work you consider.
I was wondering, this might be a silly question, I don't know much about fig trees, but I was wondering if they're somewhat invasive, because although I have this fig tree at my house, and my friend has one too, and I've seen other fig trees popping up in other parts of the yard, and I know I didn't spread the figs anywhere unless an animal did, but I've had other fig trees.
Well, there are a lot of insects that will colonize your figs when they're ripe. The big Japanese beetles will, and also birds.
Yeah.
Birds love figs.
But is that easy for them to just start popping up anywhere?
Absolutely. Birds will relocate the seeds of that fig to other parts of your yard or your neighbor's yard. Well, because fig, honestly, if fig didn't produce a good, viable fruit crop, fig would be on the invasive species list in California, and it wouldn't be legal to grow. Because they'll come up everywhere from seeds. So.
Yeah, and I've got probably 7 different plants in my yard.
In general, seedling figs aren't going to be very good quality. I mean, maybe 1 out of 100 is ever going to give you a good quality fig. So probably the best thing to do when you see them come up is just to get rid of them, or give them to somebody else and let them become their problem. Okay. So any questions on microclimate before we move on? Everybody good on microclimate? All right, let's talk about the handouts today. I think the first one is, this is a list that I put together a number of years ago, Tom's Top 21. It talks about it talks about apples, apricots, apriums, cherries, plums, pluots, peaches, nectarines, these are all varieties that are very low chill adaptable and varieties that I've had good luck with all over Southern California, from coastal plantings to inland plantings. So, you know, if you're looking for a place to start, and they're, you know, successive ripening varieties. Here's my apple Dorset Golden, apple Fuji, apple Pink Lady. So 6 months worth of successive ripening apples. We've got all kinds of different varieties on here that will give you fruit throughout the season. So this is a good place to start if you're just looking for some general suggestions on what to grow in the area. But don't limit yourself to this. I mean, there's 100 other good selections that are every bit as important. So I recommend that if you're looking for selections, talk to some of the other local growers. Talk to what some of the other people are doing in your area. Talk to the local retail nursery professional about what they've done and had success with. So just by asking around a little bit. You know, Master Gardener Group is a great group for that because you've got people from all areas around the county, from all different, you know, different geographic adaptabilities to all different soil types, and people are going to tell you what they've done well with and give you some good information. So this is just a guide to go by, some simple suggestions, but it's not the only varieties that you can do well with in the area. So, you know, grow what you like and what you'll use. Maybe you don't like Fuji apple or Pink Lady apple, so you know, you don't have to take my word on it. You're going to grow what you like. The next handout is the blueberry handout. And this one I think is really important. In general, when I talk about fruit trees, I'm almost always going to tell you that fruit trees are going to do better in the ground than they will in a container, especially if you're looking for longevity. But there's absolutely an exception when it comes to blueberries. I don't recommend blueberries in the ground at all. Blueberries in the ground tend to, especially if there's any kind of a drainage issue, even if you're using the right soil media, you're still planting them in a bowl. So they don't like to stay wet. There are two things that blueberries absolutely need to thrive and survive. The first one is fast drained soil, and the next one is an organic, acidic soil condition. So it's hard to create that in the ground. It's hard to do that in the ground. Unless you're going to do it in a raised bed, you know, 12 or 18-inch high raised bed where you're going to put in all that, you know, organic type media, you know, 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 bark, 1/3 of sandy humic-based potting soil, and then you can grow in a raised bed. But containers are easy. Blueberries love to be grown in containers. The larger the container, the better. And even though, again, all blueberries are considered self-fruitful, all the southern highbush blueberries are self-fruitful, and there's about a dozen varieties that are marketed through Southern California. Again, like I said earlier, you'll get 10 times the crop with cross-pollination. So I recommend planting no less than 3 different southern highbush blueberry varieties. So put in an O'Neill, put in a Misty, put in a South Moon, put in a Sunshine Blue, put in a Sharps Blue. Just, you know, shake it up, put in at least 3 different varieties, and your crop will be spectacular. One single variety will absolutely give you fruit, and they can all be considered self-fruitful, but why settle for a little when you can get a lot? So blueberries in containers work out really well. There are a couple of things that are important to being successful with that. One of them, again, is container size. You know, I think you want to provide a maximum amount of container space that you can handle for those blueberries. So for me, it's a half barrel, one of those half wine barrels or oak barrels used for wine or whiskey or things like that. And it's a really nice, good quality barrel. They cut them in half. They're about 35-gallon capacity, and I can easily put 3 varieties or even 4 varieties of blueberries in one barrel. So I do that all the time. Now, what you want to consider though, once that plant starts to grow, is if I've got a barrel and I've got, you know, 3 plants in it and they start getting big, I don't ever want to let those 3 plants or 4 plants in that barrel get any larger than the root zone that I've given them to grow in. So once they reach 4 feet or 5 feet high, then I'm going to cut them back down and keep the plant structure, the top, in balance with the barrel that I've given it to grow in. So, and that's a good hint for any type of plant or that you want to grow in a container for an extended period of time. If you can keep the top in balance with the root zone, you've got longevity. You've got a plant that's not going to physically stress. If the top gets too big, then every time the wind blows it over. Every time you go away for a 3-day weekend and forget to irrigate it, it goes too dry. It starts to go into physical stress mode, and then when they do that, it's hard to bring them back. So maintain that balance between top and root. Now, blueberries are an interesting category because if you don't prune them at the right time, you jeopardize pruning out a lot of your crop. So a lot of people say, oh, well, yeah, I pruned my blueberries in January, and then in the springtime I didn't get any flowers. That's right, because blueberry flowers are going to set on wood in the fall. So that growth in August and September and October, that's where your flower buds are going to set. So you don't want to do any winter pruning on blueberries. You want to do all of your pruning right after crop. So my blueberries in general are ripe from about, I think I'll probably have some within the next 2 weeks, for sure. And then I'll have continuous blueberries until about mid-July or the end of July. So as soon as blueberry season is over, as soon as the last few fruit are harvested, either by my granddaughters or my birds, at that point, I'm going to bring those plants way back down, smaller than the size of the barrel. Then I'm going to allow the next 3 months of regrowth, and that's my fruiting wood again for the next spring. So summer pruning only on blueberries. As soon as the crop is done, do your pruning. Because they're in a container, they're going to require more feeding than most fruit trees would, because the nutrients are going to leach out of the container a lot more rapidly than they would in the ground. So a humic acid-based type fertilizer, lower in nitrogen. We'll talk more about fertilizers when we go on, but feeding on container plants is going to be lightly and frequently for 9 months out of the year. You're going to want to start feeding about the end of January, and you're going to want to finish up around the end of September or 1st of October. So nothing October, November, December. You want to leave that 3-month period so that all the nitrates can be used up and kind of worked out of the soil, and then feed them again, start feeding end of January. So lightly and frequently for about 9 months out of the year. Any questions on blueberries? Yes?
I grow blueberries, and the one problem I've been finding, like 5 years in now, is that my organic matter in my containers is decomposing. So that it used to be here was my barrel and my soil was nice here, and now my soil's way down here.
Okay, if you're 5 years in, they're ready to be transplanted. So
transplant, you like pull them up
yeah,
before soil.
Yeah. So allow, and I like to do this in the winter normally. December, January is a good time to do it.
Well, they've got all that fruit setting because right now they're just.
No, you don't want to do it now. Like I said, it's December, January.
It's March now.
December, January. What you want to do, let them go a little bit on the dry side, tip the barrel over, roll it a couple of times, pull that whole root ball out. So you're going to maintain that root clump together. If the barrel's still good, you can reuse the barrel. But typically for me, after 5 years, the barrels start to fall apart. The wood's rotting. Yeah. So I basically just break the barrel down, break it apart, throw the barrel rings in the recycling bin, and throw the old stays in the fire pit, and get a new barrel. Make sure you got plenty of drainage holes drilled in the bottom. Take the media recommendation again. Put about 8 or 10 inches in the bottom of the barrel. Pack it in real good. Take your root ball, set it back in there. Now you have some area around the sides, so start filling in with all that new media around the sides. Bring it right back up to the highest level that you want, and you're good for another 4 or 5 years. Okay. Now that's another good point if you're transplanting something. There are a lot of containers out there that are available for nursery use, for home use, and the decorative planter market coming in from the Middle East and China right now is phenomenal. They're bringing in some absolutely beautiful, high-fired, high-glazed pottery that you can get a pot as big as a Volkswagen nowadays. So you can buy anything you want, and you can buy any style or any shape or any color. But if it's something you're going to want to transplant out of, you've got to be careful, because a lot of these containers, I've seen a lot of them that are kind of like. Okay, and that beautiful Italian herb, that's only $450. So I put my $12 blueberry in there and grow it for a few years, and then decide I've got to transplant it. So what are my options? I can transplant my $12 blueberry by breaking a $450 pot. So make sure that whatever containers you're using, if you're going to transplant in and out of those containers, they're tapered side like the barrel. You're going to want the top diameter to be slightly larger than the base diameter. You've got a little bit of taper between top and base. You can always roll that over on its side and pull that plant out and reuse that container. Especially if you're spending good money on these containers. This type of pot, what you should do is take take a 5-gallon azalea when it's in bloom and just set it down in there and enjoy the flowers, and then take it out and put something else in there. Don't ever plant in a pot that's tapered or corset waisted, sided like that, because you'll never be able to transplant out. So be careful the types of containers you're using. I really prefer the half barrels. A half barrel is the largest size container that I can move around myself without a whole lot of physical effort. So anything bigger than that's going to be too much work, and most anything smaller than that I don't use too much, except maybe for cactus or succulents or strawberries or something like that. So be careful what type of containers you're using. Make sure they're tapered side if you're going to transplant out. If you're using the big, beautiful ornamental containers, they are just that, ornamental only. Yes?
One last question, because you've mentioned planting 3 blueberries in 1 barrel, and then you've got to keep them pruned, right, to that size.
Yes.
So what I've done is, I started doing that, but I wanted more fruit, and my berry, like they were big enough, so I have 2 different barrels, each with 2 in them. Can you go for like one whole variety in one cultivar in 1 barrel, another cultivar in another barrel, and you're still going to get the cross-pollination?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. As long as they're close spacing, absolutely.
But then you're still pruning them way back down then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
To like what, 12 inches?
Yeah, probably 12 to 16, something like that. And then that regrowth is where all your fruit's going to come from. So.
In last year's wood.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're doing that pruning early enough in the summer that you're going to get, 2.5 or 3 months worth of regrowth.
Right.
Before the plant wants to go dormant. So 1st of August is kind of like my deadline.
Okay.
Even if there's still fruit on there, it's like, come on girls,
okay.
Get it, eat it, make use of that last fruit. Get some Cheerios out here, we need to use up these blueberries. So I want them gone so I can prune the plants and start to rejuvenate for next season.
Okay, great.
Okay, any other questions on blueberries? Yeah?
Sorry, one last question.
Yeah.
Do they play well with others? Could I put it in an herb garden, or blueberry?
Yeah, I think you could. It's a really nice plant. I mean, it's a good-looking ornamental plant. They anytime you get into an area where it really gets cold in the winter, they'll go dormant. In Southern California, they really don't go dormant, but they come up with a really pretty fall color. So it'll be a bright orange, and they'll hold that kind of a bright orange fall color until when the new buds and the new leaves start to come out, then the old growth will just drop off. Yeah, I think they would companion plant well around other things. Yes?
Is there a particular way that pruning a blueberry is best?
No, just in balance with its container. I think as long as you're doing that, I mean, you can always look for issues, detail issues, is there one big main branch that's too aggressive? Is there deadwood or broken branches or areas where the growth is too thick? So you can always do a little bit of detail work, but in general, it's just bringing it back down to balance with the container. Okay, let's move on. The whole concept of backyard orchard culture is one where I think you really need to, close up the books, because this is really something that, not really, this is something where I want you to use your imagination. I don't want you to listen to the neighbor down the street that says you can't grow 2 fruit trees right next to each other. I don't want you to look at what the commercial farmers are doing up in Tulare County or out here in Escondido or anywhere, because you're not a commercial farmer and your neighbor is not a fruit tree expert. So basically what you're doing is you're making this fit your landscape style, your landscape function, and your landscape needs. So it's really growing a fruit tree in the landscape is no different than growing anything else in the landscape, other than the fact that that plant's going to produce fruit for you. But we've been intimidated over the years by all of these commercial studies that have come out of UC Davis and UC Riverside and the Cal Poly systems. And you know what? Every one of those studies has been funded by who? Commercial agriculture. So they're teaching us how to be a farmer in our backyard. And that's the worst thing you could ever consider, is trying to be a farmer in your backyard. You want your backyard to be a place of beauty, a place of function, a place that you can use on a daily basis for all of the all of the wonderful things that you want to do and you want to complete. So don't be pigeonholed into growing single trees on big wide spacings. Those big wide spacings aren't there for backyard growers. They're there for farmers that are running big equipment around their fields. So if you don't have to run a John Deere tractor through your backyard, you don't need 20 feet of space in between your fruit trees. And you know what? If you've got 5 acres and you've got a John Deere and you want to run it through your backyard, by all means, use whatever space is required. So I'm not telling you what you have to do. I'm giving you options. I want you to think about it and think, hey, I can espalier an apple up against this wall. I can grow 3 peaches over here in the corner and have a July and August and a September peach. Or, yeah, I can do a few barrels with blueberries. You know, I can plant a Meyer lemon close to the swimming pool and by the kitchen window where I can take advantage of all that wonderful fragrance from those flowers and have some lemons to use. So backyard orchard culture is something that should be fun. It's not something that should be intimidating. It's not something that you should have to think a lot about. It's just mainly working fruit trees into space where you would have put an ornamental before. Consider this. I want to plant a hedge. So I go down to Walter Anderson Nursery and I see David. And I go, David, I don't want to look at my neighbor's driveway anymore. I've got 40 feet. I need to plant a hedge. The planter bed's 2 feet wide and it goes down 40 feet to the sidewalk. So David's going to take me out and he's going to show me laxleaf privet and Japanese boxwood and photinias and maybe some cypress or something like that. All those are great hedging plants and they'll all do what I want to do. I want to grow a hedge 8 feet high, 40 feet long, 2 feet wide. Could I use dwarf citrus? Yeah. Absolutely. Dwarf citrus, if it didn't produce a fruit, would still be a worthwhile landscape plant. It's still a great hedging specimen. Big, great, dark green foliage. Now you've got flowers. You've got white or light pink flowers that are very fragrant. Meyer lemon and Bear's lime, things like that, will bloom for 4 or 5 months out of the year. So now I not only have my function, my hedge function, I've got fragrant flowers, beautiful flowers, and now I've got 10 varieties of fruit. So I can plant my Washington navel for winter and my Valencia orange for summer. And I can plant my Algerian mandarin and my tango and my gold nugget. So I've got 8 months worth of successive ripening mandarins. I can put in a tangelo. I can put in a ruby grapefruit for summer and an oro blanco for winter. I can put in a Bear's lime. I can put in a Meyer lemon. I can put in anything I want. And now not only do I have a hedge that's functional and usable, I've got beautiful fragrant flowers and I've got 10 varieties worth of fruit in the same space where all I wanted to do was not look at my neighbor's driveway. Go out of the box. Don't feel that you have to be intimidated by what somebody else told you or what some farmer did 100 miles away. It makes no difference. It's all about what works for you. So make sure to take that into consideration when you're considering any kind of a fruit tree purchase or planting. Make sure to give it some space. Use it for its other attributes. The fact that it produces fruit is really, it's a primary function, but it could be secondary to the other attributes. Maybe it has a great, red foliage or flower color in the spring. Maybe it has a great bright orange fall color in the fall. Maybe you can use it for other different types of structuring or function in your landscape. So there's all kinds of reasons and places to grow fruit trees besides just fruit. So take advantage of those. Yes?
What about water requirements? Are they about the same as the ornamentals?
Yeah, absolutely. And after we, well, I guess we need to do that now. What do you say, about 10 more minutes? 10 more minutes. Okay, we're going to quickly talk about mulching, irrigation, fertilization, and pest control. So let's discuss mulching. How many people are mulchers? Oh, good, good. You know, when I did this presentation 15, 16, 17 years ago, and I'd ask people to raise their hand if they're a mulcher, I might get 1 or 2 hands that would be raised in the whole room. Now everybody knows the attributes of mulching. So I'm just going to tell you what I consider to be the 4 main attributes of using a good biodiverse mulch. Number 1, a 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch will keep your soil an average of 15 to 20 degrees cooler during the hottest part of the summer. So when the stress factor is the worst during the hottest part of summer, you now have a root system that can function in soil that's at least 15 degrees cooler than unmulched soil. So that's huge. Julia.
Hey, I just wanted to mention to you that you have 10 minutes before break. So
Right.
I want you to feel like you need to cram everything in.
Well, when we come back from break, I want to do my PowerPoint. So
Okay, perfect.
I just
You
want to try and
have so
get
much great
these 2
information and you
messages
need to rush.
on. And if I don't make it, then we'll cover a little bit when I come back. So mulching, keeping the soil cooler. Number 2, 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch will make better use of your irrigation water by 50%. 50%. So that's a calculatable savings. You know, if I had an outdoor area, say 50% of my water bill was outdoor use, 50% was indoor use. It's really more like 60-40, outdoor 60, indoor 40. Or it has been until our current drought situation, and now a lot of us have changed philosophies on irrigation, which is a good thing. So let's say it's 50-50, and half of my landscape is either lawn or hardscape, so I'm irrigating part of it, not irrigating some of it at all. And then the other half is my fruit tree orchard, my rose garden, my Japanese maple collection, my palm collection, my perennial beds, my succulent areas, and all of those are mulched with a 2 to 4 layer, a 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch. My water bill is $100 a month, $50 outdoors, $50 indoors. I've now mulched about 50% of my landscape. So an easy calculation would be my outdoor savings would be about $12.50 a month. So that'll probably pay for the mulch layer. Plus you're saving water, plus you're making better use of a resource that's been stressed in California for the last few years. So that's a second great reason to mulch. Number 3, increase in bioactivity in your soil. Mulching is the natural way that trees and plants and forest and jungle situations grow and thrive. Without that natural mulch layer, none of those things would be possible. So when the gardener comes in with the blower and wants to blow all the leaves out from underneath the avocado tree, tell him to shut it off and put it away. Let that leaf litter fall, let it build up, and add to it. Add to it with a good biodiverse mulch layer. You'll have all that nice beneficial mycorrhizal activity, earthworms, beneficial insects and fungi that help your trees and your plants and your roses and everything you're growing to grow in a more natural, more established, more disease-resistant and insect-resistant manner. So make sure you're using the mulch for that. If it was only for that reason alone, I would say it's worth mulching for. And now you've got one more reason. What's the worst chore in the landscape?
Weeding.
Weeding. So a 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch will not allow weed seeds to germinate through it. So you'll get an occasional weed that will blow in the wind, but that 2 to 4 inch layer of mulch will probably cut down your worst landscape chore by 80 to 90%. So keeping the soil cooler during the hottest stress period of the year, making better use of your irrigation water by 50%, making, bringing back all that bioactivity and allowing plants to function in a more natural form, and keeping weed seeds down. Does anybody have a reason why they shouldn't mulch? I only want a reason why you shouldn't mulch. Does anybody have one? Good, then we're all in agreement. So next time when I see you guys, everybody should raise their hand. Let me move on. Okay, irrigation. Now that we're all effective mulchers and we know we can cut back on irrigation, we want to make sure of one thing, that we are making good use of our irrigation. I'm not saying that you can't have a lawn, I'm not saying that you can't have ground cover areas, I'm just saying make good use of your irrigation water. So remember earlier we talked about checking your irrigation system to figure out how much water you're actually putting on it, set out some cups, measure it, know what your irrigation system is doing for you. As long as you understand that, then you'll be able to irrigate properly. Now how many people have a moisture meter? A few of them. Proudly raise your hands, proudly. Don't do this, I can't see it. Okay, everybody that doesn't have a moisture meter, the next purchase you make at the retail garden center should be a moisture meter. It'll cost you about $6.99, so be prepared. But what that does is it makes you the master of your irrigation system. You don't have to rely on a timer. You don't have to rely on a schedule. In fact, you don't want to rely on a schedule. You want to irrigate when you need to irrigate. So go out, check the soil. If it reads dry on the meter, irrigate thoroughly. If it reads wet, if it reads moist, you don't have to irrigate at all. So make sure that you're checking that meter. It's a very simple probe with a gauge that just says moist, wet, dry. And if it's moist and wet, you don't need to irrigate. When it gets down close to dry, irrigate thoroughly, let it go back to that point again.
Would the 6-inch one be
Sure. Most of them are 8 or 9 inches. Some of them are a little bit longer than that. I mean, you could spend $200 on one, but it's ridiculous because the $6.99 job will do the same thing that the $200 one will. So I don't recommend that you spend any more money than that on it.
In each microclimate in your yard, do you have
My irrigation system at this point is set up with a very similar system that we can talk about. It's on what they call tensiometers. So in my landscape, each timer, or each station, has 2 points that are tensiometer points that measure the amount of moisture in the soil. So when it gets down to that point, then the system comes on and irrigates thoroughly, and then it shuts off after that. So, and you know what? That used to be an expensive system. When I looked at those systems originally, 20 years ago, the brain itself was $3,000, $3,200. But I just looked at one the other day up at Farm Supply in San Luis Obispo, $199. $199 for 5 stations.
Wow.
So the pricing's come way down now. In fact, if you check with your local irrigation district, they may actually have programs where they'll come and install either that type of system or a weather station-based system for free.
Can you tell us what is that again? A tensiometer?
Tensiometer just measures the amount of moisture in the soil.
And how do you spell that?
I have no idea how you
Looks
spell
like
it.
Tension, like tension.
Yeah, no, I wasn't
Just gonna
the world's best student when it came to spelling.
Thank you.
I'm glad I have spell check and a really good editor. So basically what I'm saying is monitor your irrigation system. Don't allow it to think for itself, because a timer, the old $59 Home Depot timer, is mindless. It doesn't think for itself. It just comes on at 6 a.m. and waters for 20 minutes and then shuts off. Whether it's raining or whether it's hot or whether it's foggy or cold or whatever, it doesn't think. It doesn't understand what's going on. So the weather station-based system or the soil probe system, the tensiometer system, actually think for themselves. And if you have one of those 2 systems in, if you're on a water rationing schedule, like where I'm at, I'm only supposed to irrigate Tuesday from 6 p.m. to Wednesday 6 a.m. or Saturday 6 p.m. to Sunday 6 a.m. I can run my system. But because I have a system that's on a smart timer that thinks for itself, I have no restrictions on when I can water.
Oh.
So also, one of the interesting things that people don't realize is there's no restriction on irrigation of edibles. So if you're watering vegetables or fruits or anything you can eat, you can water it whenever you need to water it. So there are no restrictions on edibles. No. No, not for edibles. Check with your water district. Well, I still would recommend watering in the middle of the day. Yeah, well, I would check with the city. I'm going on what it says in my area. So, but every city or every water district may have different restrictions. Okay, you guys, you want to take a break now? 1 minute? Okay. All right. I'm not going to sing for 1 minute.